You just saved this wrong man's life. He whispered it against her ear, quiet, certain, final, while his blood was still warm on her hands and the monitor behind him was beeping steady for the first time in 6 minutes. Grace Carter didn't step back. She looked directly into the darkest eyes she had ever stood this close to and said, "Then we'll figure that out after you don't die." He almost smiled. That was the beginning. That was the night a nurse from Ohio walked into the middle of something the entire city of Chicago had been pretending didn't exist, and a man who owned half that city decided she was the one person he couldn't afford to lose. Hit subscribe right now. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Do not move. Grace Carter believed in two things absolutely. The body always tells the truth and institutions always lie. 11 years of nursing had given her both of those convictions, and the drive from Columbus to Chicago at 2 in the morning 3 weeks ago had done nothing to change them. She had packed 2 bags, left a ring on a kitchen counter, and told herself she was starting over. What she had not told herself, what she refused to say out loud, even in the silence of her new apartment, was that she was running from a chief of medicine who had made her professional life a slow, deliberate punishment, from a version of herself she no longer recognized, from the exhausting performance of pretending that the things she thought were not the things that were happening. Chicago was supposed to be different. She was 40 minutes into her first Thursday night shift at Mercy General when she understood that it was not. Bay 4. Phyllis didn't look up. Phyllis never looked up. She ran the ER night floor with the unsentimental efficiency of someone who had stopped being surprised by anything approximately 15 years ago. GSW left flank. Vitals are dropping. Harmon's in there, and he is currently losing an argument with the patient, which is a sentence I never expected to say, so go deal with it. Grace was already moving. She pushed through the curtain, and she saw him immediately, not because he was the largest person on the gurney, though he was not, because 2 other nurses were orbiting him with the careful distance of people who had tried to get closer and been redirected, but because he was the only person in the room who looked completely, absolutely in control of a situation in which he was the one bleeding. 6'3", built like a man who had decided decades ago that vulnerability was a language he wasn't going to learn. His suit jacket had been cut away expensive cloth. She noted automatically the kind of expensive that didn't announce itself. His shirt was soaked dark on the left side. His hands gripped the gurney rails without white-knuckling them, the grip of someone managing pain as a logistical problem. And Dr. Richard Harmon, Harvard Medical. 17 years, the undisputed authority of this ER was standing 3 feet away from him, holding a blood pressure cuff like a man who had forgotten how to use it. "Sir," Harmon was saying with the precise over-enunciation of someone who had lost the thread of a conversation and was trying to relocate it through volume. "You need to listen," the man said, quiet, unhurried, the voice of someone accustomed to rooms going silent when he spoke. "I've told you twice. Don't touch me again until I say so. I'm happy to explain why, if you have the patience for it. You're bleeding." "I'm aware. I was present when it happened." Grace stepped forward immediately. She cut straight through the static, no apology, no hesitation, clean and direct. "Grace Carter, I'm your nurse. I need a line in your left arm in the next 30 seconds, which means you need to make a decision right now. Are we doing this?" He turned his head. His eyes were very dark, very still, the eyes of a man who had spent his entire adult life measuring other people and had gotten extraordinarily good at it. He looked at her for 4 full seconds. Then he held out his left arm. Behind her, Harmon made a sound she chose not to interpret. "Thank you," she said, and went to work. His name was Marco, just Marco. She didn't push. She was threading the IV and watching his color and calculating blood loss against the timeline Phyllis had given her, and she was doing all of that while tracking the thing that was making the back of her neck tighten in a way that had nothing to do with the wound. His color was wrong. Not just blood loss wrong, the gray at the edges of his mouth was asymmetric with the wound site. His breathing was controlled, too controlled, and the right side of his chest was expanding fractionally more than the left in a pattern she had seen exactly twice before in 11 years. And both times she had been right about what it meant. "Marco," she kept her voice flat and practical. "Any chest tightness, pressure, anything that feels like it's sitting behind your sternum?" "No." "History of heart arrhythmia? Anyone in your family?" A pause, half a second. She caught it. "No." "You hesitated." "I don't hesitate." "You just did." She didn't say it as a challenge, she said it as a data point. I need the information, not a performance. Something shifted in his face, subtle like a lock turning. My father, he said, undiagnosed arrhythmia, died at 58. I had a workup 6 years ago. The cardiologist found a tendency toward irregular rhythm under extreme physiological stress. He looked at her. Tonight qualifies as extreme. Yes, it does. She straightened. Dr. Harmon, I want a 12 lead before imaging. Harmon looked up from the chart. Protocol on GSW is imaging first. His father died of an undiagnosed arrhythmia, and he has a documented tendency toward irregular rhythm under stress. She turned and held Harmon's gaze with the specific directness she had learned to use when there was no time for the performance of deference. A 12 lead is 4 minutes. If I'm wrong, we lose 4 minutes. If you're wrong, we lose him. The room held its breath. Harmon set down the chart. Get the 12 lead. It was not given graciously. She didn't need gracious. She was right. The EKG printed, and she looked at it, and her stomach dropped. Not dramatically, not visibly, just the clean internal drop of a body recognizing a pattern before the mind has finished processing it. SVT converting. His heart was running a circuit it was never supposed to run, driven faster by blood loss deteriorating in real time. She showed it to Harmon without a word. He looked at it. His jaw tightened. We cardiovert. We medicate first. She was already at the drawer. Adenosine, 6 milligrams rapid push. If we shock a patient who's already hemodynamically compromised from blood loss, before we try chemical conversion, we risk pushing him into full cardiac arrest. She drew up the syringe. Her hands were perfectly still. She was faintly amazed by this. Step 1 of the algorithm, Dr. Harmon, 6 milligrams, then we reassess. He stared at her. She felt the weight of 17 years pressing against her 3 weeks. She felt every person in the room waiting. The monitor spiked. Yes or no, she said. 1 second, 2. Do it. She pushed the medication. The monitor flatlined. 4 seconds of absolute silence. Grace counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Marco Vitelli's heart came back strong, rhythmic, exactly right. Someone exhaled. The room moved again. Harmon said quietly, get him to the ICU. And as they began moving the gurney, Marco's hand caught her wrist. Not rough, precise, the way everything about him was precise. Grace Carter, he said, that's me. He looked at her with the expression of a man who had made a decision. Don't go anywhere. She removed his hand gently from her wrist, set it back on the rail and said, get some rest. That's a medical instruction. Then she stepped back and let the team move him, and she stood in Bay 4 holding the EKG printout and trying to understand why the words don't go anywhere felt less like a request and more like the beginning of something she couldn't yet see the end of. She would understand it before the night was over. Sam Davis materialized at the nurse's station 40 minutes later with a coffee cup and the expression of someone delivering information they have weighed carefully and decided must be delivered. Sam had been at Mercy General 6 months. She was from Atlanta. She had a talent for appearing exactly when something important needed to change hands, and she did it so naturally that it took a moment to realize what had just happened. Bay 4, Sam said, documented and charted. Grace, she set the coffee down. The man you just pulled back from a cardiac event, his name is Marco Vitelli. The typing stopped. He runs the Vitelli organization, Sam said quickly and quietly. Has for 15 years. His father built it. Marco expanded it. He controls shipping on the south side, a significant portion of what moves through O'Hare, and approximately 6 city council members who would prefer everyone forget that fact. He also controls 3 real estate holding companies and has been the subject of 4 federal investigations that were opened and quietly closed over the last decade. She paused. There are 2 men outside the ICU right now who came in through the loading dock. Building security let them in, which means someone above building security made a call. And Harmon has been on the phone with administration 4 times since you brought Vitelli upstairs. Grace was very still. There's already a question being raised about the adenosine, Sam said, about authorization. Harmon authorized it. Harmon is currently describing it as a recommendation he evaluated and implemented. Sam's voice was even and honest, which is different from what happened. Grace felt the floor shift under her. That is not what happened. I know that, Sam met her eyes steadily. I'm telling you what is currently being constructed. She paused. Watch yourself. This hospital has a long memory for people who get noticed in complicated situations. Is that a warning? It's a description, Sam said carefully. What you do with it is your business. She walked away. Grace sat for a moment. Then she pulled up the internal directory and typed a name she couldn't explain why she was typing, and she stared at the result, Dr. Elliot Donovan, Chief of Surgery, and felt something cold and specific settle into place in the back of her mind. She closed the screen. She went back to work. Gerald Finch found her at 3:47 a.m. with the expression of a man reading a script he didn't write and didn't endorse. The patient in ICU Bay 6, he's asking for you, by name specifically. He adjusted his collar. Administration has indicated we accommodate reasonable requests from that particular bay, given various considerations. I'm in the middle of a chart. The chart will be there. ICU Bay 6, Marco was sitting fully upright, hands open on the blanket, looking like a man holding a meeting. He looked like a man who had informed his body that being shot was a minor administrative issue now resolved. You came, he said. You're still my patient. Sit down. This time she sat without the pause. He looked at her with the focused attention of someone who paid very close attention to competence. You saved my life tonight, he said. My team. You. Quiet. Absolute. The doctor who needed 2 minutes of persuasion to do what you already knew was right, that was not saving my life. That was you with a syringe in complete conviction and no hesitation. I know the difference. He paused. I want you to know I don't take that lightly. Grace held his gaze. What did you want to tell me? He looked at her for a moment. Then, I did not come to this hospital by ambulance tonight. I came voluntarily. I was meeting someone, a specific physician. 4th floor, cardiology corridor, 11:40 p.m. His voice was level factual, the voice of a man delivering coordinates. 3 people knew I would be there. 2 of them are standing outside this door right now. The other one is a physician on staff at this hospital. He watched her face. I was shot in that corridor at 11:42. The shooter was gone in 90 seconds, which means someone in this building told them I was coming. The room was quiet. The physician you were meeting, Grace said carefully. Who? He watched her for a long moment. You pulled up a name tonight, he said. At the nurse's station. I was told. His voice was not apologetic, informative. The name you looked up, Donovan. He held her gaze. He has not sent one word to this floor since I arrived. A man I was scheduled to meet in this building for a matter of significant mutual concern, and he has not called, has not asked a colleague to check, has not registered any awareness that I exist in this ICU. He paused. I want you to think about what that means. Grace's mind was moving the way it moved when a chart wasn't adding up. Fast, quiet building. Why tell me? She asked. Because you are new, he said. Your loyalties here are not yet arranged. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, something more considered. And because someone who pushes 6 milligrams of adenosine into a stranger's IV while a senior physician is trying to stop her is not someone who looks away from things that don't add up. She stood, checked his drip, moved toward the curtain. Grace, she stopped. His voice behind her was different, quieter, without the professional precision, something more honest in it. The physician you're thinking about right now, he said. Don't go looking alone. She walked out. Bay 6 was empty at 6:51 a.m. The monitor leads coiled on the pillow. The IV line on the tray, no chart note after 4 a.m., no discharge paperwork, no record of any kind. Marco Vitelli had been removed from Mercy General System with the thoroughness and speed that required administrative access and deliberate intent. On the tray table, a plain white card, a phone number, nothing else. On the back, 4 words in handwriting that was precise and unhurried. You'll hear from me. She put it in her pocket. She had saved her gloves from Bay 4 in a sealed bag. Instinct, the quiet voice she had learned never to argue with. She straightened, picked up her chart, walked back to finish her shift, carrying in her pocket a number that connected her to the most dangerous man in Chicago, and in her mind a question that was only going to get louder. Why hadn't Donovan come? She slept 3 hours. Her brain didn't. By noon, she had a list with 7 items on it. She had fallen asleep with 4. The additions had come while she was unconscious, because that was the specific, relentless quality of a mind that had decided something was wrong and was not prepared to wait for permission to pursue it. Item 1, who deleted Marco's record. Not the discharge, there was no discharge. The deletion required a login, which meant a name. Item 2, Donovan, everything. Item 3, the travel nurse. The one Sam had mentioned who found something and disappeared. Item 4 was the white card face down on her counter, which she looked at for 10 full minutes before she turned it over. She was back at Mercy General by 1:15, not scheduled until 7. She went in through the ambulance bay moving with the confidence of someone who belonged everywhere she was going because she had learned long ago that in a hospital, certainty of movement was its own credential. Sam found her at a second-floor terminal at 1:30, and Sam did not say hello. She said quietly and flatly, "What are you doing?" "Discharge log, Vitelli's file, every login between 4 and 7 a.m. Sam stepped up beside her, angled her body to block the terminal from the corridor. "What are you expecting?" "I don't know yet, but someone deleted a patient's entire record in 40 seconds. That requires access and intent. I want the name." "Filter by user ID," Sam said after a pause. "Not timestamp. Someone covering their tracks wouldn't use their own workstation." She kept her voice very low. "There are 2 terminals in this building logged into a shared administrative account that doesn't flag individual users. One is building services. One is the surgical suite prep room on the 4th floor. The 4th floor, the same floor Marco had been shot." Grace typed. The log populated. At 4:22 a.m. a session from the surgical suite prep room terminal had accessed Vitelli's admission file and cleared the record. Duration 40 seconds. "Who has access to that terminal?" Grace asked. "Anyone with a surgical suite clearance badge." Sam's voice was even. "Attendings, senior residents, the chief." Neither of them said the name. Grace printed the log, folded it, pocketed it. "The travel nurse," she said. "I need a name." Sam was quiet for 3 seconds. "Jenny Reese. She came through Midwest Med Staffing last spring. Worked post-surgical on 4, on Donovan's direct service." She paused. She started asking questions about medication discrepancies in post-op patients. She was gone in a week. Contract terminated. No explanation. Post-surgical. 4th floor. Donovan's service. The shape of something was building in Grace's mind, not complete, yet not fully visible, but present. The way a face in a dark room becomes recognizable before you can name it. "I need the complication rate data for Donovan's service," Grace said. 18 months. Post-surgical infection rates compared to department average. "Can you pull it without saving to the hospital system?" Sam looked at her. "That is a very specific thing to ask." "I know. And if someone is monitoring what gets accessed, then we find out." Grace met her eyes. "You've been here 6 months. You told me about 3 buried complaints about Jenny disappearing about Donovan. You already know something is wrong. I'm asking you to confirm what you already know." Sam looked at the floor, then back. The calculation was visible in her face, not hesitation, but the specific weight of someone deciding that the price of silence was higher than the price of action. 48 hours, she said. "Thank you." "Don't." Sam turned, stopped. "One more thing. Harmon is with administration right now. Someone requested a formal review of Bay 4. The adenosine call." She paused. "They're calling it a protocol deviation." And Grace, the request didn't come from Harmon. Grace went cold. "Donovan. The office of the chief of surgery." Sam's jaw was tight. "Someone is building a file on you. I don't know whose file yet, but they started it this morning." She walked away. Grace stood in the hallway and breathed for 5 counted seconds. Then she took out the white card and her phone. The call connected on the second ring. Silence, not empty, waited attentive. "Grace Carter," she said. A pause, then his voice lower than it had been in the hospital. "I wondered how long you'd wait. I have questions. In person, not on the phone." She heard him calculate that specific quality of silence that meant a decision was being made with full information and complete certainty. "Aldo's Coffee Shop, Michigan and Wacker, back booth left side, 3 o'clock. The line went dead. She put the phone in her pocket and thought, this is either the most intelligent thing I have done or the beginning of something I cannot walk back from. She went anyway. The man in the back booth at Aldo's was not Marco. He was younger, compact, with the trained stillness of someone who had spent years learning to be underestimated. He folded a newspaper precisely when she sat and said, "Nurse Carter," as if confirming a manifest. "Where is he?" she said. "Safe. My name is Daniel. Marco wanted me to meet you first." "Why?" "Because Marco doesn't walk into situations he hasn't fully assessed. Neither do I." He looked at her steadily. "You called him 4 hours after he left your hospital. You pulled the discharge log. You're requesting complication data from a colleague. We needed to know if you were careful, not just thorough." She felt the specific discomfort of realizing how much he knew and how recently he'd learned it. "You've been watching me. We've been watching the hospital. You happen to be moving in interesting directions." He picked up his coffee. "What information do you have?" She put the log printout on the table. "Someone accessed Vitelli's file at 4:22 from the surgical suite prep room terminal on the 4th floor. The same floor he was shot. 40 seconds. It erased every record of his admission." She kept her eyes on Daniel's face. "That terminal requires a surgical suite clearance badge. The chief of surgery has one." Daniel looked at the printout, did not touch it. "You know what you're implying." "I know what the data shows. I also know there's a travel nurse named Jenny Reese who worked on Donovan's post-surgical service last spring, found medication discrepancies, and was gone within a week. And I know Marco was in that building to meet Donovan, and whoever shot him knew exactly when and where he'd be." The cafe moved around them. Ordinary sounds, the specific surrealism of ordinary sounds during extraordinary conversations. "Jenny Reese," Daniel said. "Tell me what you know about her." "She worked post-surgical on 4, found discrepancies, disappeared." "We know about her." He set down his cup. "Marco has known about Donovan for 6 months. That is what last night's meeting was supposed to address. Marco had documentation Donovan has an arrangement with Meridian Pharma, which supplies Mercy General's post-surgical medications. Medications being billed at the premium tier and delivered at the generic tier. The difference across 22 months, approximately $1.4 million. Donovan and a Meridian regional director named Curtis Hale split it." He held her gaze. "Jenny Reese found the medication logs. Someone reported her before she could act on it." Grace felt the shape complete itself the way a diagnosis clicks, not like discovery, but like confirmation of something the evidence had been building toward all along. She was going to file a complaint. She never got the chance. Daniel's voice was careful. Marco was going to give Donovan a choice. Stop and walk away, or don't stop and face the alternative. He paused. "Someone warned Donovan before the meeting, and Donovan arranged the shooter. What does Marco want from me? He wants to know if you're willing to do what Jenny tried to do, but with protection and infrastructure." He met her eyes. "She was alone. You don't have to be." "I want to talk to Marco directly." "I know." He stood. "Come with me." Marco was sitting at a table with a tablet in his hands and a fresh bandage visible at his collar, and he looked up when she walked in with the specific expression of a man who had been waiting and had not allowed himself to show that he was waiting. He looked, she thought, like a man who had decided she was going to come and had been holding the certainty of that close. "You came," he said. "You keep being surprised by that," she said. "I keep being—" He paused, set down the tablet. "Unprepared for you, which is not a sensation I have much experience with." He opened a folder on the table and slid it toward her without preamble. Billing records, medication delivery receipts, email chains between Donovan and Curtis Hale. 22 months. She pulled it toward her and started reading. "The patients," she said without looking up, "received adequate care. The generics work. The fraud is financial." He paused. "With one exception, 3 patients on Donovan's service developed post-surgical infections that the correct protocol might have caught earlier. 2 recovered." He held her gaze when she looked up. "One did not. A 63-year-old woman named Patricia Okafor. Routine knee replacement. Post-surgical infection that escalated to sepsis. She died on a Tuesday morning in that hospital, and her family was told it was an unpredictable complication." Grace was quiet. "Why does this matter to you?" she asked. "Pharmaceutical fraud, that's not your territory." Marco was quiet for a moment, long enough that she understood he was choosing whether to answer, not how. "Patricia Okafor was my mother's closest friend," he said. 40 years. My mother sat in that hospital and was told There was nothing anyone could have done. His voice did not rise, did not change pitch. It remained level, which was somehow more devastating than volume would have been. I don't accept things I'm told to accept. I find out what actually happened. It's a habit I haven't been able to break. He looked at her directly. And what happened to Patricia Okafor happened because a man in a position of absolute trust decided his profit was worth more than the patients in his care. And that man has been protected for over a year by an institution more interested in its reputation than its people. Grace looked at him for a moment, then she looked back at the folder. The protocol deviation review. If my access gets restricted before I can get what I need, how long do you have him? If Harmon formalizes it, 48 hours. If it escalates to a formal hearing, 72. Then you have today and tomorrow. He watched her read. The Thursday delivery from Meridian. Curtis Hale will be on site. 2 p.m. That's your window to get Hale on record in a way that's natural, unrecorded, and tells us whether he knows the investigation is moving. She looked up. You want me to approach him? I want you to be a thorough nurse with a legitimate supply discrepancy she's been trying to resolve through standard channels. He held her gaze. Which as of this morning is actually true. I had Daniel create one. Documented, time-stamped, a real discrepancy in a real patient's post-surgical medication order. It will hold up to any review. She looked at him. You had that prepared before I called you. I had it prepared before you left the hospital this morning. He was not apologetic. I told you I don't walk into situations I haven't assessed. And you assessed I would call. I assessed he said precisely that you were not the kind of person who walks away from a chart that doesn't add up. He held her gaze. I was correct. She looked back at the folder. I want a copy of everything here. Already made. He slid a USB drive across the table. And I want to talk to Jenny Reese. Something crossed his face. Fast there and gone. That, he said carefully, is more complicated. He picked up his coffee cup, put it down without drinking. We have been trying to locate Jenny Reese for 3 weeks. He met her eyes directly. She appears to have become very difficult to find. Grace heard the words and felt them land with the specific cold clarity of a diagnosis that changes everything before it. Define difficult, she said. Gone, he said, as completely as my hospital record, and considerably longer ago. Grace didn't sleep that night. She lay on her covers with the folder on the nightstand and Jenny Reese's name on a notepad beside it, and she went back to the beginning the way she always did, not to the most recent evidence, but to the first assumption she might have accepted too quickly. Jenny had not been caught mid-complaint. She had been caught before she had even decided what to do with what she found, which meant someone had been watching the system from inside, watching which files got accessed, watching which nurses asked questions that didn't fit their assigned patient loads. Someone who was invisible because they had been there long enough to become part of the institution's ambient noise. She added a line to the notepad at 5:40 a.m. Who told Donovan about Jenny? She was at the hospital by 7:15. She walked with the confidence of belonging everywhere she went because that was the only armor available that didn't show. Sam was coming off night shift. Grace caught her at the locker room door, and Sam looked at her face and said immediately, 2 minutes, supply room, 2nd floor. She said it the way people say it when they've had the room picked out for exactly this kind of conversation for a while. They stood among boxes of gauze and saline, and Sam pulled a folded paper from inside her scrub top without preamble. Post-surgical infection rates. Donovan's service. 18 months. 4.3% above department average, concentrated specifically in the post-operative window between days 2 and 5. Her voice was flat in the specific way that people make their voices flat when the number they found was not the number they wanted. That is not statistical noise, Grace. That is a pattern. Grace took the paper. He's using the generic formulation in the highest risk window. He's using whatever Meridian actually delivers, which is not what he bills for. Sam crossed her arms. I went back through the charts, individual patients. I found her name. Patricia Okafor, Grace said. Sam stopped. You know. I know. Grace folded the paper. Sam, I need to tell you something. And once I tell you, you can't unknow it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Sam looked at her. I pulled infection data at 2 a.m. from a hospital terminal on my own login. I think I'm already past the line. You are, but there's deeper. She told her everything. Meridian Pharma, Curtis Hale, the 1.4 million, the emails, the billing records, the 67 files. She did not name Marco directly. She said she had a source outside the hospital with independent documentation, and Sam did not push on the name because Sam was smart enough to understand which pieces of information she needed and which ones she was better off not holding. She told her about Jenny Reese. That was the piece that changed Sam's face. Gone, Sam repeated. 3 months, no contact, disconnected phone, no forwarding address. Sam was quiet for a long moment. She had a roommate, she said finally. I knew Jenny a little. We overlapped for a month when she started. Her roommate's name was Cora. I don't know her last name, but I know they went to a coffee place on the north side, Bickerdike Avenue. Thin, the thinnest possible thread. But threads were what she had, and Grace had learned that the right thread pulled with the right care unraveled entire systems. One more thing, Grace said. I need the visitor log for the 4th floor. Night Marco was shot, every badge scan, every entry, every elevator used between 10 p.m. and midnight. Specifically whether Donovan badged out before or after the shooting. Sam's eyes sharpened. If he left before, he knew it was going to happen, because you don't leave a building without checking on the patient you're scheduled to meet unless you already know that patient isn't making it to the meeting. Sam's jaw tightened. I'll have it by noon. At 10:45, Grace was charting in the hallway outside room 14 when Donovan walked past. She had his face memorized from his hospital ID photo. Seeing it in person confirmed something she had suspected from the photo, that this was a man who had spent decades being the most credentialed person in every room he entered and had let that become the whole of his identity. He moved with a specific confidence of institutional permanence. He saw her immediately. Their eyes met. She held his gaze, gave him nothing, no recognition of anything beyond professional neutrality. He held it for 2 seconds, kept walking. His pace did not change. His expression did not change. But his left hand, the one holding the tablet to his side, tightened on it. Half a second, involuntary. She clocked it from 8 feet away. He was afraid of her. Not much, not enough to change his strategy, but enough. She turned back to room 14. Her own hands were completely still. At 11:50, her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't have saved, but she recognized the cadence instantly. No greeting, no name, just Meridian delivery. Thursday, 2 p.m., Curtis Hale on site. This is your window. She texted back one word, understood. At noon, Sam slid a folded paper across the nurse's station counter without making eye contact. Grace read it and the medication room door closed. Donovan's badge had scanned out of the building at 11:37 p.m. on the night Marco was shot. The shooting had occurred at 11:42, 5 minutes. He had been in the building long enough to confirm Marco's arrival, long enough to make the call, and then he was gone clean with 5 minutes of deniable distance between himself and whatever happened in that corridor. Except Marco hadn't died. And now there was a badge log and Grace had it, and Thursday was 31 hours away. She called Marco directly. He answered on the first ring. The badge log, she said. Estoy 11:37. He confirmed you arrived and left. A pause, not long. But she heard what was on the other side of it, the specific weight of 6 months of suspicion becoming certainty, and the difference between those two things was not a small distance to cross. That's the sequence confirmed, he said. There's more. Sam has the complication data 4.3% above department average in the highest risk post-op window. She cross-referenced individual patients. Patricia Okafor is in the data. Marco was quiet for 4 seconds. Send it to Daniel, all of it. Then quieter. How are you holding up? It was the first personal question he had asked her. She heard the slight awkwardness of it, the quality of a man who asked personal questions rarely and was doing it anyway. I'm fine, she said. I'm always fine when I'm working. That sounds like something you tell yourself. It is, she said. It still works, she paused. Thursday needs to hold. It will hold. His voice settled back to precision. Daniel will be in the building. If anything moves wrong, you don't manage it yourself. You leave and you call me. Not Daniel. Me. Another pause. And Grace, don't let them make me disappear, she said. I know. A beat of silence. Yes, he said. Exactly that. At 6:15 p.m., Sam appeared with a coffee and a very specific expression. She sat beside Grace in the break room and said quietly, "Cora Briggs, Jenny's roommate. I found her through a nurse at Northwestern who knew them both. She's willing to talk." She slid a piece of paper across. "Tonight, 7:30, Kimball Avenue Library, periodicals section." She paused. "She's been watching her building entrance for 2 months. She doesn't think she's being paranoid." "She's not," Grace said. "I sent her your photo," Sam said. "She needed to know you were real before she agreed." She looked at Grace directly. "Be careful. Whoever's watching the hospital is watching who you talk to outside it." Cora Briggs was 28 and small-framed and had the specific alertness of someone who had been afraid for long enough that alertness had become her resting state. She was in the periodical section with a magazine she was not reading, and she looked up at Grace with the expression of someone who had been hoping for and dreading this meeting in exactly equal measure. "The last time I talked to Jenny," she said without being asked, she had been holding this and needed to release it, "was a Tuesday night in April. She came home wired, not scared, wired like her brain was going too fast for her body." She pressed her hands flat on the table. "She said she found something in the medication records. She didn't tell me what. She said she didn't want me involved. She said she was going to talk to someone in administration in the morning." "Did she say who?" "No." Cora's jaw tightened. "She was gone when I woke up Wednesday. I thought she'd gone in early. By Thursday, I knew something was wrong. I called the hospital. They said her contract was terminated effective immediately. I called the agency. They said it was the hospital's decision. I called Jenny's phone." She paused. Her voice stayed even, but her hands pressed harder against the table. "It rang for 3 days, then voicemail, then disconnected." Grace held herself very still. "Cora, did Jenny take anything when she left?" "Her work bag, her phone." She paused. "She left her laptop." The air in the library shifted. "I couldn't figure out who to give it to," Cora said. "I didn't know who to trust. I was scared." She looked at Grace with the full unguarded weight of 3 months of fear behind it. "Do you know what happened to her?" "I don't know yet," Grace said, "but I'm going to find out. And the laptop, if her medication files are on it." "I brought it," Cora said. "Right there." She had decided before Grace arrived. She reached into her bag and put a laptop on the table between them. Grace took it. "Thank you." "Find her," Cora said. "Oh, 2 words. The complete weight of 3 months in them. Not a request. An instruction from a woman who had been carrying this alone and was now very carefully giving part of it to someone else." "I will," Grace said. She was back in her apartment by 9:15. Daniel's contact, a young man named Yusuf, arrived at 9:50 and worked for 22 silent minutes on Jenny Reese's laptop. At 12:14, he turned it to face her. 67 files. Spreadsheets, photographed documents, voice memos, and 1 video file. She opened the most recent voice memo first, dated a Tuesday in April, 10:53 p.m. Jenny's voice was clear and fast, the voice of someone talking quickly before their nerve broke. "Okay, memo for record. I found the 3rd set of discrepancies today. Post-surgical pain management April through November Donovan service. The generic substitution is consistent across the entire period. I cross-referenced the billing codes with the Meridian delivery manifests. The numbers cannot be reconciled unless someone is deliberately substituting. I think I know what I need to do. I need someone outside the hospital. I'm going to figure out the right person tomorrow. I'm going to be careful." The memo ended. Grace sat with those last 4 words for a long moment. "I'm going to be careful." The specific courage of someone who was afraid and going ahead anyway, and the specific grief of knowing that the care had not been enough. She opened the video file. Phone camera. Unsteady. Shot through a gap in a doorway. 2 men a hallway, 1 in surgical scrubs with a hospital badge and silver-streaked temples, Donovan unmistakably. 1 in a business suit with a leather portfolio. The audio was partially obscured by the building's HVAC, but she could hear fragments. Thursday delivery. From the suited man. Quantities confirmed. From Donovan, and then clearly the suited man saying, "The other matter handled. Don't concern yourself." The other matter. Handled. The Tuesday after which Jenny Reese ceased to exist in any traceable way. Grace closed the laptop, sat with her hands flat on the table. Breathed. She texted Daniel video on the laptop. "Send Yusuf back tomorrow. And tell Marco it's all there." At 10:47 p.m., her phone buzzed from a number she didn't recognize. 4 words. Stop now. Walk away. She looked at it for a long moment. The precision of it, not a threat, not an appeal, a boundary being drawn by someone who knew exactly how far she'd gotten and was trying to establish the edge before she crossed it. She had already crossed it. She took a screenshot, sent it to Daniel, turned the phone face up, picked up her pen, went back to work. Because the moment you stop was the moment everything you hadn't finished became someone else's problem forever. And Grace Carter was not finished. She was not even close. The meeting with Warren Chu lasted 19 minutes and told her everything she needed to know. He was polite, precise, the specific politeness of someone who had been in institutions long enough to have perfected the language of managed outcomes. He offered her coffee. He opened her personnel file with practiced casualness. He said the word formality in a tone that meant its precise opposite. What the panel is looking for, he said, is demonstrated an understanding of the chain of command. That's all this is, Grace, he paused. A reasonable explanation, a demonstrated commitment to protocol, and this goes away. She looked at him the way she looked at patients whose presenting symptoms didn't match their chart. Carefully, completely. His blink rate was slightly elevated. He had touched the corner of the folder 3 times. When he said formality, his right hand had pressed flat against the desk, the involuntary grounding gesture of someone whose body knows something their performance is not acknowledging. He was afraid. He was offering her a door, and he needed her to walk through it. I appreciate the clarity, she said. I'll be prepared for the panel. She watched him decide she was naive. She let him decide that. She thanked him and walked out and texted Daniel 1 word the moment the office door closed behind her today. Back in 90 seconds, confirmed. 2 p.m., 8:47 a.m., 5 hours and 13 minutes. She found Sam and told her what she needed. Eyes in the 4th floor corridor during the delivery window, watching who greeted Hale before Grace reached him. Sam said she had a noon medication check on 4 that she could be extremely slow about. Grace told her about Chu. Sam was quiet for a moment and then said very quietly, God. 1 word that held everything. At noon, Marco texted her directly. Jenny Reese is alive. Grace read it twice. Then she sat on the nearest available surface, a supply cart, which rolled slightly, and she gripped the edge of it and read it a 3rd time. She's in Milwaukee. She left voluntarily after administration told her a prior licensing issue from nursing school would be surfaced if she filed a complaint. She chose to run. We found her this morning. She's willing to make a statement. Grace texted back. Does she know about Patricia Okafor? 40 seconds. She does now. She wants to come back. Grace put the phone in her pocket and sat on the supply cart and gave herself 30 seconds. Precisely 30. She counted them. The relief was real and she let it be real. And underneath it was grief because Jenny was alive, but Patricia Okafor was still dead. And the relief and the grief were not in conflict with each other. They were both true simultaneously. And she had learned a long time ago that the hardest part of this work was holding both at once without letting either one collapse into the other. 30 seconds. Then she stood, straightened her scrubs, went to check her noon medications. At 1:45, she walked into the 4th floor corridor with a tablet in her hand and the specific energy of a nurse who had been bounced around bureaucratically and was done being polite about it. She had rehearsed not the words, those were real, grounded in a real patient file, a real discrepancy, but the register, the exact volume of professional frustration, the exact absence of anything that looked like knowledge. Curtis Hale was already in the corridor. She recognized him immediately, height-built leather portfolio, the suit that announced money without announcing it. He was with a mid-level logistics administrator reviewing something on a clipboard. Sam was at the far end of the corridor, moving with elaborate slowness between her patient's room and the nursing station. Grace approached. Excuse me. She addressed the administrator, not Hale, because a nurse works the chain. I've been trying to resolve a delivery discrepancy for Unit 8 for 3 days and I'm not getting a response. Is this the Meridian rep? Yes. She turned to Hale. The post-surgical analgesic order for Unit 8, quantity delivered last Thursday, was 14 units short of the billing manifest. I've submitted 2 correction requests. No response. Can you help me reconcile this? She held up the tablet. She watched his face. He was practiced, smooth, the reflexive competence of 20 years in pharmaceutical sales. He took the tablet, He looked at it, he nodded appropriately, and then he looked at her badge. At her name specifically, not her title, not her unit, her name, Grace Carter, and the look lasted 1/2 second too long, and his expression stayed correct. But his eyes did what the eyes of people carrying secrets always did when they encountered something they weren't expecting. They registered and then they locked down. He knew her name, before today, from somewhere else. She held his gaze steadily, kept her face a professional, mildly frustrated, waiting. He handed back the tablet. I'll need to check our manifest records. Can I get your contact information and have our resolution team follow up? Of course, she gave him the hospital number, thanked him, walked away. She made it to the stairwell and called Marco before the door closed behind her. He knows my name, she said, from before. Someone told him. How certain? As certain as I am about anything clinical. He recognized it and covered it. Donovan told him this morning, after Chu's meeting. She was moving down the stairs, voice low. He's scared, not panicked, scared, which means he knows something shifted, but he doesn't know how far. Good, Marco said. Scared people move faster, which means we need to move faster. His voice sharpened. The delivery bay. We had a camera. Hale met with someone from hospital administration before you spoke to him. 6 minutes. The camera has audio. She stopped on the landing. Donovan. No, Marco said. Dr. Warren Chu. The stairwell was very quiet. Chu walked into that delivery meeting and spent 6 minutes discussing how a specific nursing staff member needed to be managed before Friday morning. His voice was precise and completely flat. We have him on record. We have Donovan's badge log. We have Jenny's video. We have 67 files of billing documentation. And we have Jenny Reese on a call with a federal attorney in Milwaukee right now. Grace pressed her back against the stairwell wall. Federal. Pharmaceutical fraud crossing state lines. The attorney is someone I trust. I made the calls this morning after you texted me about Chu. A pause, the pause of someone choosing honesty over efficiency. I should have told you immediately, I'm sorry. The apology, from this man. She absorbed the specific weight of it. You got there, she said. Yes. And then 2 hours, then leave through the ambulance bay. Daniel has a car. She went back to her floor and she worked. Completely. Carefully. 4 patients who didn't know any of this and needed their medications checked and their vitals taken and someone to hear them when they said the pain was worse than the number on the chart. She did all of it. She was fully present and also running a parallel process at full speed, and she had not known she could do both until she had no choice. At 2:57, Sam appeared at her elbow. She didn't speak. She slid a folded note into Grace's pocket with the practiced smoothness of someone who had been working on their own courage for 3 hours. Grace read it in the medication room. Chu left at 2:40, Donovan at 2:51. I watched them both badge out. They know something moved. A pause in the handwriting, the pen pressure heavier on the next line. I'm not scared. I wanted you to know. Whatever comes next, I'm in. All the way. Grace put the note back in her pocket, said goodbye to each of her patients in the ordinary way, warm, professional, without any of the weight showing. She had gotten very good at that. She took the ambulance bay exit at 3:04. Daniel's car was black, unremarkable, and he didn't speak when she got in because Daniel understood when silence was the only response that fit. She sat in the back and watched the hospital shrink through the rear window and felt something she couldn't immediately name. Not triumph, not relief, not the clean finish of a confirmed diagnosis. Something more complicated, something that knew the difference between stopping a thing and undoing it because Patricia Okafor was still dead, and Jenny Reese had spent 3 months in Milwaukee, and a man named Donovan had sat in a hospital for 17 years and built a system of harm inside a structure designed for the opposite, and none of that was undone. It was only stopped. She spent the drive deciding that stopping it was enough, not all the way, but enough to stand on. Marco met her at the door. Not seated, standing, and she had never seen him standing before. She had seen him horizontal and seated and propped against ACU pillows and standing. He was different, fully himself. He moved carefully, the one concession to his injury, but he moved with the deliberateness of someone who had decided that injury was behind him and had communicated this to his body as a directive. He looked at her face when she walked in and he didn't speak immediately. Just looked. The compass needle recalibration she had seen since Bay 4, except that now there was nothing left to recalibrate. The needle had settled. He was simply looking at her the way people look at things they have decided are real and permanent. "It's filed," he said. "Federal complaint. 3:15 p.m. Jenny's statement, the billing records, the video, the badge log, the delivery bay footage. All of it. The chain of evidence is complete." Grace absorbed this. "Donovan and Chu will be contacted by federal investigators before the end of business today." Something moved in his expression, not satisfaction, the more specific thing of a man who built something careful and is watching it produce its intended result. "The conduct hearing tomorrow morning's now irrelevant. No institution files a personnel action against a witness in an active federal investigation. Hale, his attorney called 20 minutes ago. He's cooperating. Full documentation of the arrangement going back 30 months. 4 hospitals in the Meridian supply chain. Not just Mercy General. 4 hospitals. She thought about the number of patients, the number of post-surgical windows, the number of families told that what happened was unpredictable, unavoidable, no one's fault, the number of people who had grieved into that lie. "Patricia Okafor's family," she said. "Will be told the truth," he said quietly. "Not today when there is something definitive and complete to tell them, but they will know. They will know it was not unpredictable. They will know it was not unavoidable." He paused. His voice did not fluctuate, but she heard what it cost him, the specific cost of carrying this for 14 months. "That matters more than the legal outcome." "Yes," she said, "it does." A quiet settled between them. Not uncomfortable. The quiet of 2 people who had been running at full speed for 4 days and had arrived at the first moment where speed was no longer required, and neither of them quite knew what to do with stillness. "There's a task force," Marco said. "Federal healthcare oversight, being established as part of this investigation's outcome. They need a clinical consultant, someone who understands hospital systems from the floor level up, who can identify protocol deviations and evaluate care standards from the inside." He held her gaze. "They're going to ask you." "How do you know?" "Because I suggested it." Simply, without apology or a performance. 2 hours ago, when I was on the phone with the federal attorney, I told her that the person who built this case from the floor of a hospital she'd been at for 3 weeks on 4 days and 3 hours of sleep with a formal conduct review over her head was not someone they should overlook. He paused. She agreed. Grace was quiet. She thought about Columbus, about 2 suitcases and a 2 a.m. drive. She thought about the specific stubborn quality of 11 years that had built her hands and her instincts and her refusal to look away. She thought about what it meant that all of it had led here to this room, to this specific convergence of a dead woman and a missing one and a man who answered on the first ring. "I have patients tomorrow morning," she said. Something warm moved across his face. "I know. And a colleague named Sam Davis, who has been the bravest person in this story for 4 days and who deserves to hear what just happened before she hears it any other way." "Call her," he said. "I will." She held his gaze. "And Jenny Reese. She lost 3 months, Marco. Her apartment, her financial stability, her sense that the places she worked were safe. She's going to need more than a federal statement and a thank you." He looked at her. "I know. I mean real support, concrete support, not a case file, a person." "I know," he said again, and this time it was different, not the acknowledged data point, but the full real understanding of it. "I'll handle it personally, I promise." She believed him. She didn't know exactly when she had started believing him, not in Bay 4, not at Aldo's, not at the table with this folder between them. Somewhere in the accumulation, somewhere in the way he said Patricia Okafor's name, without the performance of caring, just the actual caring plain and costly and real. "The task force," she said. "Tell them I'll consider it. That's all they're asking." She picked up her jacket. She walked to the door, and then she stopped because there was one piece of unfinished business. One thing she had been carrying since the night in the ICU when he had said something and she had walked out without responding to it. She turned. "That night in Bay 6, she said, "you were right." He looked at her. "About what specifically?" "That I would want to find the truth." She held his gaze. "You knew that before I did." Something happened in his face. Something she had not seen from him before. Something unguarded crossing his expression faster than he could manage it. A flash of something simple and unperformed and fully human. He was a man who had spent his entire adult life being the most controlled person in every room he entered. And he looked at her with the expression of someone who had encountered repeatedly, helplessly, something that made control considerably harder than usual. And he was not, she observed this clearly, trying to hide it. Grace Carter, he said. Marco, she said. She went to call Sam. Sam picked up on the first ring. Grace said 2 sentences. Sam exhaled long, slow, the release of something that had been lodged in her chest for 4 days. And then she said in a voice that was completely steady and completely not okay and completely fine. Is it over? The worst part, Grace said. Yes. And the rest? The rest, Grace said, we're just getting started on. Sam made a sound that was half laugh and half something else entirely. Then I guess we get to work. 6 a.m., my floor. I'll bring coffee. Bring good coffee, Sam. Grace? Yeah. You did something tonight, Sam said quietly. I need you to know I saw all of it, every single piece of it. Her voice was steady and completely real. I saw it. Grace held that for a moment. Then get some rest. I'll see you at 6. She slept 9 hours. The hard, deep, complete sleep of a body that has finished something enormous and knows it. When she woke at 6 a.m. and lay in the gray morning light of her Chicago apartment, she did the inventory because that was how she oriented herself in the world, the same systematic way she ran a patient assessment, deliberately, completely. Jenny Reese was alive and in Milwaukee with a federal attorney. Patricia Okafor's family would learn the truth. Donovan and Chu were walking into the worst morning of their professional lives, and they had built it themselves brick by brick over 18 months of choices that prioritized their own profit over the bodies in their care. Sam was getting coffee, and somewhere in this city, a man who had answered on the first ring, a man who had started all of this because his mother's best friend died of a preventable infection, and he could not accept the lie that nothing could have been done. That man was already working. Because men like Marco Vitelli did not stay still for long, and the direction he had chosen to not stay still and had turned out to matter more than she had any way of knowing on the night she pushed a needle into his arm. Grace Carter got up, made coffee, and went back to work. Because the patients didn't stop needing care when the crisis resolved. Because the floor needed staffing and the charts needed charting, and the system that had failed Patricia Okafor was still running and would need to be watched carefully, consistently, from the inside by someone who understood it and refused to look away from the things that didn't add up. She had always been that person. She walked into Mercy General at 6:58 a.m. on a Friday morning with her badge on her chest and Sam beside her, and the absolute knowledge that somewhere above them, in the administrative offices of an institution that had spent 18 months protecting its own reputation over its patients, 2 men were learning that the nurse they had tried to make disappear was the only person in the building who had never not once allowed her hands to shake. Grace Carter had not come to Chicago to run from something. She had come to find out what she was made of. Now she knew, and so did everyone else.